Princess Velcara Thin stood at the observation deck of her flagship, the Time's Eternal Dominion *, and watched the stars drift slowly past the reinforced glass. She was young by Dravosi standards, barely 300 cycles old, but she carried herself with the confidence of a conqueror. Her pale blue skin shimmered under the ship's lights, and her 4 eyes, too large and too small, focused on the distant yellow star that grew brighter with each passing hour. The Sol System, home to a species called humans. Her scouts had discovered them just 2 cycles ago, and the reports had been almost laughable. The humans had only recently learned to travel between stars. Their technology was primitive. Their military was small. They would fall like every other species the Dravosi Empire had encountered in its 10,000 years of conquest. This was to be her first military campaign, a gift from her father, the Emperor. He had given her 40 of the Empire's finest warships and told her to bring him a new world. She intended to give him an entire system. "My princess," said Admiral Cothran, approaching with a bow. He was old and scarred, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. "We will reach the outer boundary of the Sol system within the hour." Velcara nodded without looking at him. "And what resistance can we expect?" "Very little, according to our intelligence. The humans have a small fleet stationed near their homeworld. Perhaps 50 vessels of varying sizes. Nothing that can challenge us." "Good." She finally turned to face him, her expression calm and certain. "We will make this quick. I want to be dining on Earth within 3 planetary rotations." The Admiral bowed again and left to prepare the fleet. Velcara returned her gaze to the stars. She thought about how her name would be remembered in the histories. The princess who conquered humanity. The heir who proved herself worthy of the throne. It was a pleasant thought. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel near the orbit of a large blue planet the humans called Neptune. The transition was smooth, and within moments, all 40 ships confirmed their positions. They formed a perfect arrow formation, with the Time's Eternal Dominion times at its center, and began their long journey toward Earth. It was during this approach that the sensors detected something unexpected. "My princess," the sensor officer called out, his voice uncertain. "We have contact. A single vessel, bearing directly toward us." Velcara raised an eyebrow. "A single vessel? What type?" "Unknown configuration. Small, very small. Perhaps 40 meters in length. Crew complement estimated at 10 to 15 individuals." A murmur passed through the bridge. The officers exchanged confused glances. Velcara herself felt a flicker of amusement. One tiny ship against 40 warships? Were the humans mad, or simply foolish? "On screen," she commanded. The main display flickered and showed the approaching vessel. It was indeed small, almost comically so compared to the massive Dravosi warships. Its hull was gray and angular, marked with symbols that the translator identified as USS Wanderer and United Earth Navy Scout Frigate. "A scout," Velcara said, her tone dismissive. "They sent a scout to face us. Perhaps they wish to negotiate," Admiral Cothran suggested. "Perhaps." She considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. If they wanted to negotiate, they would have sent diplomats, not a military vessel. This is either a gesture of defiance or a foolish attempt at reconnaissance. Either way, destroy it. We have no time for games." The Admiral relayed the order, and 3 escort vessels broke formation to intercept the human ship. Velcara watched with mild interest, expecting the engagement to last mere seconds. Aboard the Times, USS Wanderer *, Lieutenant Commander Jack Reyes stood at the center of his small bridge and studied the alien fleet on his tactical display. 40 ships, each one at least 10 times the size of his own vessel. He had been in the Navy for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like this. "Well," he said, keeping his voice steady for the sake of his crew, "I guess first contact didn't go the way anyone hoped." Pilot Officer Amy Torres looked up from her console, her dark eyes wide but focused. "Sir, 3 of them are breaking off and heading toward us. Weapons charging, I see them." Reyes took a deep breath. They were a scout ship. Their mission was to observe. gather data, and report back. They were never meant for combat, but the alien vessels weren't giving them a choice. He thought about his options. He could surrender. He could try to run. Or he could fight and buy Earth as much time as possible while transmitting everything they learned about these invaders. It wasn't really a choice at all. All hands, battle stations, he announced over the ship's intercom. This is not a drill. We have hostile contact, and they're not interested in talking. We're going to do our jobs. We're going to make them bleed for every inch. And we're going to make sure Earth knows exactly what's coming. The crew responded instantly. There were only 12 of them, 12 against 40 warships, but not one of them hesitated. Sergeant Derek Cole powered up the weapons systems, his jaw set in grim determination. Chief Engineer Nathan Price began rerouting power to shields and engines. Communications Officer Lisa Grant opened a priority channel to Earth and started transmitting. "Torres," Reyes said, "get us into that asteroid field. Let's see how well they fly." Amy Torres grinned, despite the fear in her heart. "Yes, sir." The Times Wanderer Times banked hard and accelerated toward a dense cluster of asteroids nearby. The 3 alien ships followed, firing as they came. Green energy bolts streaked through the void, and Torres weaved between them with skill born from years of training and natural talent. On the Times Eternal Dominion *, Princess Velcara watched the engagement with growing irritation. The human ship should have been destroyed by now. Instead, it was dancing between her escort vessels, dodging fire that should have been impossible to dodge. "What is taking so long?" she demanded. "The human pilot is skilled," the sensor officer admitted reluctantly, "and they're using the asteroid field for cover. Our ships are having difficulty targeting them." Velcara's eyes narrowed. "Then send more ships. End this." She didn't understand yet. None of them did. They thought they were dealing with a minor inconvenience. A single pest to be swatted aside. Before the real conquest began, they were wrong. The battle for humanity's survival had just begun. And it was being fought by 12 ordinary people on a ship that was never meant for war. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing almost certain death. But they were human, and humans did not know how to give up. The asteroid field was a maze of spinning rocks, some as small as a house, and others as large as mountains. Amy Torres flew through them like she had been born in the cockpit, her hands moving across the controls with smooth precision. Behind her, the 3 alien escort vessels struggled to keep up. "They're gaining," Derek Cole reported from the weapons station. 30 seconds until they have a clear shot." "Then let's not give them 30 seconds, Jack Reyes replied. He was standing behind Torres, gripping the back of her chair as the ship rolled and twisted through the debris. "Cole, ready torpedoes. Torres, on my mark. Bring us around that big rock at bearing 275. The big one?" Torres glanced at her display. "Sir, that's cutting it close." "I know. Do it anyway." She didn't argue. The Times Wanderer Times dove toward a massive asteroid, its surface scarred with ancient craters. The alien ships followed, confident in their superior firepower. They didn't understand what Reyes was planning. "Mark." Torres pulled hard on the controls, and the Times Wanderer Times whipped around the asteroid's edge in a maneuver that pushed the inertial dampeners to their limits. For a brief moment, they had a perfect view of the pursuing vessels, and the aliens had no cover. "Fire!" Derek Cole launched 2 torpedoes. They streaked across the void and struck the lead alien ship directly in its engine section. The vessel shuddered, then began to drift, smoke and flame pouring from the wound in its hull. The other 2 ships scattered, suddenly cautious. On the Times Eternal Dominion *, Princess Velcara watched the display with growing disbelief. One of her escort vessels was disabled by a scout ship. A vessel with a crew of 12 had just crippled a warship with a crew of 300. "How?" she breathed. "The human commander used the asteroid as cover for an ambush," Admiral Cawthron explained, his voice tight with concern. "It was clever." "Clever?" Velcara turned on him, her 4 eyes blazing. It was a trick. A simple trick. Our captains should have anticipated it. With respect, my princess, the humans are fighting differently than any species we have encountered. They are unpredictable. Velkara did not want to hear excuses. She wanted results. Send 7 more ships. 10 vessels should be more than enough to destroy one tiny frigate. At once, my princess. Aboard the Times Wanderer *, the crew had no time to celebrate their small victory. The sensors showed 7 more ships breaking off from the main fleet and heading toward the asteroid field. They're sending reinforcements, Lisa Grant reported from communications. 10 hostiles now, sir. Reyes nodded slowly. He had expected this. The aliens were proud, and their pride had been wounded. They would throw more and more resources at him until the job was done. The question was, how long he could keep them busy. Grant, status on the transmission to Earth. Continuous feed, sir. Everything we're seeing, they're seeing. Weapon signatures, shield frequencies, engine capabilities. It's all going home. Good. That's our real mission. He looked around at his crew, at the 11 faces that were depending on him. Whatever happens, we make sure Earth has what it needs to fight back. Nathan Price's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. Commander, I don't know how long I can keep this up. We're pushing the engines way past safe limits. Another hour like this, and we'll burn out the core. Do what you can, Chief. Buy us every minute you can. Yes, sir. The next several hours became a nightmare of close calls and desperate maneuvers. Torres flew the ship through impossible spaces, using asteroids as shields and weapons. Twice, she led pursuing vessels into collisions with debris that their sensors couldn't track in time. Cole fired with precision and creativity, targeting weak points that the aliens didn't even know they had. Price performed miracles in engineering, rerouting power from life support, from gravity, from everything that wasn't absolutely essential to combat. By the 4th hour, the Times Wanderer had destroyed or disabled 7 alien vessels. 7. The numbers were impossible. The Dravosi had never lost 7 ships to a single enemy vessel in their entire history. And this wasn't even a warship, it was a scout, a reconnaissance craft meant for watching, not fighting. Princess Velkara stood frozen at her observation post, watching the battle unfold on the display. Her irritation had long since transformed into something else, something she had never felt before. It took her a moment to recognize it. Fear. My princess, Admiral Cothran said carefully. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. Admiral. Reconsider? Her voice was sharp. You want me to retreat from a single human ship? Not retreat. Regroup. We have underestimated them. No. Velkara's pride would not allow it. She had come here to conquer, and she would not be humiliated by 12 humans on a battered frigate. I will handle this personally. Move the flagship into position. We will finish this with overwhelming force. The Admiral hesitated. My princess. The flagship should remain. Now, Admiral. He bowed and obeyed. The Times Eternal Dominion Times began to move toward the asteroid field, and 20 additional warships followed. 25 vessels in total, counting those already engaged, would now focus on destroying the Times Wanderer *. Aboard the human ship, the mood was grim. They had fought brilliantly, but they were running out of everything: torpedoes, power, time. Corporal Megan Shaw, the medic, was treating burns and broken bones in the small medical bay. 3 crew members were already too wounded to return to their stations. Commander, Torres said, her voice hoarse from hours of constant focus. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I'm running out of places to hide. Reyes placed a hand on her shoulder. You've done more than anyone could ask, Torres. All of you have. So what do we do now? He looked at the tactical display, at the swarm of red dots converging on their position. 25 ships. There was no escape. No clever trick that could save them. But that didn't mean they were done. We keep fighting, he said simply. We keep transmitting. And we make them pay for every single life they try to take. Lisa Grant looked up from her station, tears in her eyes but her voice steady. "Earth is receiving everything, sir. They know. They'll be ready." "Then we've already won," Reyes said. "Everything else is just proving a point." He turned to face his crew. These 11 brave souls who had followed him into certain death without hesitation. He had never been more proud of anyone in his life. "Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor serving with you. Now let's show these aliens what humans are made of." The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and the Times USS Wanderer Times was ready to meet it. The asteroid field was surrounded. 25 Dravosi warships formed a sphere of death around the scattered rocks, their weapons charged and ready. There was nowhere left to run. Princess Velkara stood on the bridge of the Times Eternal Dominion *, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression carved from stone. She had never felt such anger in her life. One tiny human ship had humiliated her fleet, destroyed 15 vessels, and turned what should have been an easy conquest into a nightmare. "They cannot escape," Admiral Cothran said. "We have them trapped." "Good." Velkara's voice was ice. "I want that ship disabled. Not destroyed. I want its crew alive. I want to look into their eyes and understand what madness drives them." "As you command, my princess." The order went out across the fleet. Disable, not destroy. Capture, not kill. The Dravosi ships began their advance into the asteroid field, moving slowly and carefully this time. They had learned to respect the human pilot's skill. Aboard the Times Wanderer *, the crew was exhausted. They had been fighting for nearly 6 hours without rest. The ship was battered and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen small hull breaches that Nathan Price had sealed with emergency patches. Life support was failing. Ammunition was nearly gone. The engines were running on borrowed time. Jack Reyes looked at the tactical display and saw the end coming. 25 ships closing in from all directions. No gaps in the net. No clever escape route. "Torres, how are we doing on fuel?" "Enough for maybe 30 minutes of hard maneuvering, sir. After that, we're drifting." "Coal?" "2 torpedoes left, Commander. And about 50 rounds for the point defense guns." Reyes nodded slowly. 2 torpedoes, 50 rounds. 12 crew members, 4 of them wounded. Against 25 warships with thousands of soldiers. He smiled despite everything. "Well, let's make them count." Corporal Megan Shaw emerged from the medical bay, her uniform stained with blood that wasn't her own. "Commander, Peterson and Walsh are stable but out of action. Chen can walk but can't use her left arm. The others are holding together through pure stubbornness. Aren't we all?" Reyes turned to face his crew. "I'm not going to give you a speech. You all know what we're facing. You all know how this probably ends. But I want you to know something." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "What we've done today will be remembered. Every ship we destroyed, every minute we survived, every piece of data we sent home, it all matters. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone back on Earth. For our families, for our friends, for billions of people who don't even know this battle is happening." He straightened his shoulders. "So let's give them something worth remembering." The crew responded not with words but with action. They returned to their stations, their faces grim but determined. Torres gripped her controls. Cole powered up his weapons. Grant kept the transmission feed active. Price disappeared back into engineering, muttering about miracles. The Dravosi advanced, and the final battle began. It was chaos. The Times, Wanderer Times, darted between asteroids, drawing fire from multiple directions. Torres performed maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart, using the debris field as both shield and weapon. Cole fired with deadly precision, targeting sensors and engines rather than hulls, trying to disable rather than destroy, because every shot had to count. They took down 2 more ships in the first 15 minutes. A cruiser lost its sensor array to a torpedo and crashed blindly into an asteroid. A destroyer's engines were hit by point defense fire that Cole somehow threaded through a tiny gap in its shields. But the Dravosi were learning. They adapted their tactics, spreading out to minimize the effectiveness of the humans' tricks. They began to herd the Times Wanderer Times toward a clear space where there were no rocks to hide behind. They're pushing us out of the field, Torres reported, her voice strained. I see it. Reyes studied the display, searching for options. There were none. Do what you can. A hit shook the ship violently. Sparks flew from a console, and the lights flickered. Hull breach, deck 2. Price shouted over the intercom. I'm sealing it, but we can't take many more like that. Another hit. Then another. The Wanderer Times was being pounded from multiple angles now. Its shields failing. Its hull cracking. Torres fought to keep them moving. But the ship was sluggish. Wounded. Commander, Cole said quietly. We've got one torpedo left. And the launch system is damaged. Computer says there's a 60% chance of a misfire. Can it be fired manually? Cole hesitated. Yes, sir. But someone would have to go down to the torpedo bay and do it in person. They'd have to ride the torpedo out of the tube and trigger it themselves. Silence fell over the bridge. Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever went down there wouldn't be coming back. I'll do it. The voice came from behind them. Ensign Ryan Cooper, young and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, had been listening from his station. He was 23 years old. He had only been in the Navy for 2 years. Cooper? No, Reyes started. Commander, I'm the junior officer here. I don't have a family waiting for me. And that carrier, he pointed at the display, where a massive Dravosi vessel was moving into range. If we take that out, it'll hurt them. Really hurt them. You'll die. I know. Cooper smiled. A sad and peaceful expression. But so will a lot of them. That's a trade I'm willing to make. Reyes wanted to argue. He wanted to order Cooper to stand down, to find another way. But there was no other way, and the look in the young ensign's eyes told him that arguing would only waste the time Cooper needed. Go, Reyes said, his voice thick. And, thank you, Ryan. Cooper nodded once, then ran for the ladder that led to the lower decks. The bridge crew watched him go in silence. 2 minutes later, the Wanderer Times made its final attack run. Torres pushed the dying ship directly at the Dravosi carrier, drawing every gun in the fleet. The frigate took hit after hit, fires breaking out across its hull. Systems failing one by one. In the torpedo bay, Ryan Cooper sat in the manual launch tube, the torpedo cold and heavy beneath him. He could hear the ship screaming around him. Metal tearing. Explosions echoing through the corridors. He thought about his mother back in Ohio. He thought about the girl he'd never asked out. He thought about all the life he would never live. Then he thought about Earth. About 7 billion people who would wake up tomorrow not knowing that a young man from Cleveland had died to protect them. That was enough. Cole, open the outer door, he said into his communicator. Door open, Ryan. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just make sure you tell my mom I was brave. I will. Cooper took a breath, pressed the manual trigger, and felt himself launched into the void. The torpedo carried him directly into the carrier's open hangar bay, past the shields, past the armor, into the heart of the ship. The explosion was beautiful. On the Times Eternal Dominion asterisk, Princess Velcara watched in horror as her largest carrier tore itself apart from the inside. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull as ammunition stores and fuel cells ignited. Within seconds, the mighty vessel was nothing but debris and fire. No, she whispered. No, this is impossible. The Wanderer Times drifted silently now, its engines dead, its weapons empty, its hull broken in a dozen places. But it had not been destroyed. 4 crew members still lived within its shattered corridors. They had fought 12 against 40. They had destroyed 15 ships. They had killed thousands of Dravosi warriors. And they had won. Not the battle was lost. But something more important. They had won something that Princess Velcara was only beginning to understand. Something that would change everything. The shuttle crossed the dark space between the Times Eternal Dominion Times and the crippled human vessel. Princess Velcara sat in silence, flanked by 20 of her most elite guards, their weapons ready for anything. She did not know what she would find on the human ship. She needed to understand. 15 ships. Her fleet had lost 15 warships to a single tiny vessel. The Dravosi Empire had conquered 100 star systems, had defeated species with technology far beyond their own, had never suffered such a loss to such a small enemy. It defied everything she knew about war. The shuttle docked with the Times Wanderer Times through a breach in its hull. Atmosphere hissed as the seals connected. Velkara's guards went first, their four-armed forms moving with practiced precision through the dark corridors of the human ship. It was so small. Velkara had to duck her head to pass through the doorways. The ceiling pressed down on her. The walls closed in from every side. How could anyone live like this? How could anyone fight like this? The smell hit her next. Burned metal. Smoke. Blood. The air recyclers had failed, and the ship breathed its own death. Emergency lights flickered red in the corridors, painting everything in the color of war. They found the first bodies near the engine room. Human crew members, killed by explosions or fire or flying debris. Velkara counted 3 of them. Small, fragile things. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin that tore so easily. How had creatures like this hurt her so badly? Princess, one of her guards called. Survivors ahead. 4 of them. Velkara moved forward. The bridge was a ruin of shattered consoles and sparking wires. In the center of the destruction, 4 humans stood or sat, depending on their wounds. They were bloody, burned, exhausted, but they were not afraid. One of them stepped forward. He was tall for a human, with dark hair matted with blood from a wound on his head. His uniform was torn and stained, but he held himself straight, like a warrior, like a commander. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Jack Reyes," he said, in a voice that did not shake. "Commanding Officer of the Times, USS Wanderer **. I assume you're in charge?" Velkara's translator device converted his words into her language. She studied him with all 4 eyes, searching for something, anything that would explain what she had witnessed. "I am Princess Velkara Thin of the Dravosi Empire," she said. "You have killed many of my people today. You attacked us first." It was such a simple statement, delivered without anger or pride. Just a fact. Velkara felt something twist in her stomach. "You were in our path. Your destruction was necessary. Necessary." The human commander smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Is that what you call it? We were a scout ship, Princess. We weren't even supposed to fight. We were here to watch and report. That's all." Velkara frowned. "A scout ship? That's right. Our mission was reconnaissance. We have no heavy weapons. No armor worth mentioning. Our shields are barely strong enough to handle asteroid debris." He gestured at the ruined bridge around him. "This ship wasn't built for war. Neither were we." The translator had to work hard on some of the words, but Velkara understood enough. She understood too much. "You expect me to believe," she said slowly, "that this vessel, this tiny, broken thing, was not a warship? Believe what you want. Check the records yourself." Reyes pointed at a console that was still partially functioning. "Our ship's database is damaged but readable. You'll find our official designation there. USS Wanderer, Frontier Scout Vessel, Class C. We're rated for exploration and observation. Nothing more." One of Velkara's technicians moved to the console and began extracting data. The princess waited, her heart beating faster than it should. Around her, the 4 surviving humans stood in silence. The woman at the pilot station, young, dark-haired, her hands bandaged, watched with tired eyes. The older human with the burned hands must have been their engineer, and the female with the medical insignia was treating a wound on the engineer's arm even now, even surrounded by enemies. They were not soldiers, Velkara realized. They were not special forces or elite warriors. They were ordinary crew members on an ordinary ship, and they had destroyed 15 of her warships. "Princess," the technician said, his voice strange. "The human is telling the truth. This vessel is designated as a scout. Class C. Class C. Class C. According to their database, they have scout classes ranging from A to F, each one larger and more capable than this." "More capable?" Yes, Princess. Class A scouts have 3 times the weapons capacity of this vessel. Velkara felt the cold spread through her body. And their actual warships? Their combat vessels? The technician was silent for a moment, scrolling through the database. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, carriers. The humans have hundreds of combat vessels, Princess. Perhaps thousands. This scout ship, he gestured at the wreckage around them, is one of their smallest and weakest military assets. The bridge fell silent. Velkara's guards shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Even they understood what this meant. You're lying, Velkara said to Reyes, but her voice lacked conviction. This is some kind of trick. No trick. Reyes met her eyes without flinching. You came here thinking we would be easy prey. You thought you could just roll through our system and take our planet. But you couldn't even beat a scout ship with 12 crew members and no real weapons. He stepped closer, and her guards raised their weapons. He ignored them. You want to know what we call what happened today? We call it a skirmish. Not a battle. A skirmish. A minor engagement between a patrol vessel and hostile forces. It's not even significant enough to make the front page back home. Impossible, Velkara breathed. Ask yourself something, Princess. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. If 12 of us on this broken little ship could do this to your fleet, what happens when you face 1,000 of us on ships that were actually built to fight? She had no answer. For the first time in her 300 years of life, Princess Velkara Thin had no answer. She looked around the ruined bridge, at the bodies of the dead, at the survivors who stood defiant among the wreckage of their ship. She thought about her own fleet, reduced by 15 ships. She thought about Earth, still distant, still unconquered, still defended by forces she could not even imagine. Take them, she said finally, her voice hollow. Treat their wounds. Keep them alive. And then? Admiral Cothran asked through her communicator. And then we return to the flagship. We need to reconsider our situation. She turned and walked back toward the shuttle, leaving the humans behind. Her mind was racing, trying to process what she had learned. The Dravosi had ruled for 10,000 years because they understood one simple truth. Know your enemy. Today, she had learned she knew nothing about humanity at all, and that terrified her more than anything she had ever faced. The command center of the times, Eternal Dominion Times, was silent as Princess Velkara entered. Her officers stood at attention, waiting for orders, expecting commands to continue the advance toward Earth. They had lost ships, yes, but they still had 25 warships. The mission could still be completed. Velkara walked slowly to her command chair and sat down. She stared at the display that showed the Sol system stretched out before her, the distant sun, the planets in their orbits, and Earth itself, a small blue dot that held 7 billion humans. 7 billion. Her own flagship had a crew of 5,000. The humans had just demonstrated what 12 of them could do. The mathematics were terrifying. My princess, Admiral Cothran said carefully. The fleet awaits your orders. Shall we continue toward Earth? She did not answer immediately. Her mind kept returning to the human commander's words. A skirmish. They called it a skirmish. Not even a battle. Just a minor inconvenience on the way to real conflict. Admiral, she said finally, in our 10,000 years of conquest, have we ever faced an enemy like this? The old warrior hesitated. No, my princess. We have faced enemies with greater technology. Enemies with larger numbers. Enemies with strange weapons and stranger tactics, but never an enemy that fought with such determination, such disregard for their own survival. They did not run, even when they were outmatched, outnumbered, and certain to die. They did not run. Velkara turned to face him. Why? I do not know, my princess. I do. She stood and walked to the observation window, staring out at the stars. They were protecting their home, their families, their entire species. They knew they could not win, but they fought anyway, because fighting was the only choice they could accept. She thought about the young human who had ridden a torpedo into her carrier. She thought about the pilot who had flown through impossible spaces. She thought about the commander who had stood in the wreckage of his ship and looked at her without fear. "If we continue toward Earth," she said, "we will face more of them. Thousands more. Millions more. And they will all fight like that. Every single one of them. We have superior technology," Kothren reminded her. "Superior numbers. Superior. We had superior everything today, Admiral. And we lost 15 ships to a crew of 12. She turned sharply to face him. 15 ships. Think about that. If they had sent 20 ships against us instead of 1, we would have been destroyed. If they had sent 50, there would be nothing left of this fleet but debris and memory." The Admiral had no response. The truth was too obvious to argue with. "We are withdrawing from the Sol system," Velkara announced. Immediately, a murmur ran through the command center. Her officers looked at each other in shock. Withdrawal? The Dravosi did not withdraw. They conquered, or they died. "My princess," one of her captains said. "With respect, your father the Emperor will not. My father will receive my full report." Velkara's voice was sharp. "He will understand. And if he does not, I will make him understand. We are not retreating from weakness. We are choosing wisdom over pride." She walked back to the display and pointed at Earth. "That world is not worth the cost of taking it. The humans have shown us what they are willing to pay to protect it. The question we must ask ourselves is simple. Are we willing to pay more?" Silence answered her. "That is what I thought." She returned to her chair. "Admiral, set course for home. And release the human prisoners. Put them on their ship and leave them where their own people will find them." "Release them?" Kothren was stunned. "But they killed our soldiers. They destroyed our ships. They defended their home. There is no dishonor in that." Velkara closed her eyes. "Besides, I want the humans to know that we can be reasoned with. If we ever return to this system, I want it to be with open hands, not weapons." The orders went out. The fleet began to turn away from Earth, back toward Dravosi space. On the crippled Times Wanderer Asterisk, the surviving crew was treated with surprising gentleness by the alien guards who had captured them. Their wounds were bandaged, their ship was stabilized, and they were left with enough supplies to survive until rescue arrived. 3 days later, a human patrol group entered the outer reaches of the Sol system. They found the Times USS Wanderer Times drifting near Neptune, its distress beacon still weakly pulsing. When they boarded the ship, they found 4 survivors: Lieutenant Commander Jack Reyes, Pilot Officer Amy Torres, Chief Engineer Nathan Price, and Medic Corporal Megan Shaw. The story they told seemed impossible at first. A scout ship against 40 warships, 12 crew members holding off an alien armada, 15 enemy vessels destroyed before the battle ended. But the records were there, preserved in the ship's damaged but functional memory banks. Earth had watched the entire engagement in real time through Lisa Grant's continuous transmission. The 4 survivors became heroes. There were medals, speeches, interviews. Their faces appeared on screens across the planet. Children learned their names in school. The Times Wanderer Times itself was recovered and preserved as a monument to human courage. But Jack Reyes never felt like a hero. When people asked him about the battle, he always said the same thing. "We just did our jobs. That's all. We did what any crew would have done." He thought about Ryan Cooper every day. He thought about Lisa Grant and Derek Cole and all the others who hadn't made it home. He thought about the alien princess who had looked at him with 4 eyes full of something he hadn't expected to see. Fear. Far away, in the throne room of the Dravosi Empire, Princess Velkara knelt before her father and delivered her report. The Emperor listened in silence, his ancient face unreadable. When she finished, he sat for a long time without speaking. "You lost 15 ships," he said finally. "Yes, father. To a scout vessel. A single scout vessel with a crew of 12. "Yes, father. And you withdrew from the Sol system without completing your mission. Velkara raised her head and met his eyes. I made a strategic decision, Father. The humans are not like our other conquests. They do not surrender. They do not flee. They fight until they have nothing left, and then they fight some more. If we tried to take their world by force, we would pay a price greater than any victory could justify. The Emperor was silent again. His advisors whispered among themselves, expecting punishment. The princess had failed. The princess had shown weakness. The princess should be stripped of her rank and title. But the Emperor surprised them all. You have shown wisdom, daughter, he said. A fool sees only the battle in front of them. A leader sees the war that follows. You have looked at these humans and seen what they truly are. That is a rare gift. He rose from his throne and descended to stand before her. We will not invade the Sol system. We will send diplomats instead. We will seek trade and alliance, not conquest. If these humans fight this hard for their own world, imagine how they would fight alongside us, against our enemies. Velkara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, Father. Do not thank me. Thank those 12 humans who taught you a lesson that no Dravosi has ever learned before. He placed a hand on her shoulder. We have conquered 100 star systems. Daughter, but some species are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to be respected. That night, Princess Velkara sat alone in her chambers and wrote the final words of her report. It would become one of the most studied documents in Dravosi history, required reading for every military officer and diplomatic envoy. Future generations would debate its meaning and argue about its implications. But the final line was never debated. It was simple and clear and true. These humans do not know how to surrender. We must never give them a reason to advance. 1,000 light-years away, on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow star, the survivors of the Times USS Wanderer Times gathered at a memorial for their fallen crewmates. They stood in silence as the names were read. 8 names. 8 ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. Jack Rays looked up at the sky, at the stars that suddenly seemed less distant and less hostile than before. Somewhere out there, an alien princess was learning that humanity was not prey. Somewhere out there, an empire was deciding that peace was better than war. They had won more than a battle. They had won something that might just save both their species. And it had all started with 12 people on a small ship, doing their jobs, refusing to give up, proving that humans could never be conquered. The universe was vast and full of wonders and terrors. But humanity had just sent a message to every civilization among the stars. We are here. We are not afraid. And if you come for us, you had better bring more than 40 ships, because we don't know how to lose.